The opinions expressed on this program are solely those of individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of either Spectrum Generations or Time Warner Cable. Mature Lifestyle is made possible by Hollywood Slots of Bangor, where every player's a star, and by Knowlton Hewins Roberts Funeral Homes and Cremation Service. Our homes are warm and welcoming, and we take care of you and your family like we would our own. Call us anytime. We are here for you.
Dementia is a disease that affects the brain. The most common cause of dementia in the United States is Alzheimer's disease. More than 5.3 million Americans suffer with Alzheimer's disease, and in the state of Maine, 25,000 people are living and coping with Alzheimer's disease. I'm Dott Freeman. This is Mature Lifestyle, and today we're going to talk about the impact of Alzheimer's disease and especially the impact on caregivers. My guest today is Dr. Laurel Coleman, who is a geriatric specialist at the Maine Medical Center. Welcome, doctor.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us about Alzheimer's disease. Tell us about dementia. Help us with the terminology and how significant a problem is this?
Sure. Well, Alzheimer's disease really is an epidemic now. It is growing into a major problem that our society needs to deal with. Dementia is a constellation of illnesses that causes changes in your brain so you can't think as well, process information as well, remember as well, to the level that you need help with your daily functioning. As you said, Alzheimer's disease is the major cause of dementia. There's many others, Parkinson's disease, strokes, etc., and many people have combinations of the two. But Alzheimer's disease is probably the major source of the constellation of symptoms we call dementia.
This fall, in 2010, we have seen a tremendous outpouring of research and media attention.
Right.
Alzheimer's disease, dementia was the cover story in October on Time magazine.
Right.
We have heard about the Shriver Report, which
Right.
the project was led by Maria Shriver, whose father, Sergeant Shriver, is living and suffering with Alzheimer's disease. You were a part of that project, is that right?
I was privileged as a board member of the Alzheimer's Association to contribute an essay, and the Shriver Report was really a partnership between the Alzheimer's Association and Maria Shriver, and her real focus on women's issues, and then began to see how very compelling and how tied the issue of Alzheimer's disease was to women. Because either it looks like we're more likely as women to be affected by Alzheimer's disease, we're the greater portion of the people affected, or we're likely to be a caregiver for someone with dementia. So more than 10 million women right now are either affected by the disease or caregiving for someone. That's a huge number of people, and it's going to rise exponentially.
So because women traditionally live longer?
Age is still the greatest risk factor for developing this disease. I don't want to imply that younger people can't get it, because there's over 500,000 people younger than 65 with Alzheimer's disease. That's more than all the people with multiple sclerosis, just less than 65 with Alzheimer's. So then above 65, another 4.7 million, you're talking about a huge number affected.
And tell me a bit, Laurel, about the costs of, I mean, we see caregivers where maybe 60,000 people are serving in the state of Maine as a caregiver.
As a caregiver, right.
And the unpaid value
Right.
of that. And
it's very hard to calculate that. So on the one hand, you have to understand why Alzheimer's is a different kind of disease than other chronic illnesses. Because when you have that diagnosis, you need person help to help you with the disease. You can't just say, take this pill, I'll see you in 3 weeks and do this and that. Because you can't manage your own medication sometimes as the disease progresses. It's very expensive to have people come alongside. So whether it's a professional caregiver that you pay out of your own savings, or whether a family member forgoes a job or that becomes their second job, there are significant costs to this disease, and much of it is really uncounted in economic terms, but there are estimates in the obviously hundreds of billions of dollars. And in fact, if this continues on with our aging demographic, they're thinking this is over $20 trillion in total cost by 2050.
And right now in the United States, I believe the statistic is one person is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease every 71 seconds.
Yeah.
So in the time that we're together today, there will be 25 to 30 people who will be diagnosed. As a physician, what is Alzheimer's disease? How do you diagnose it?
Well, that's a big question and a difficult one to answer in a short period of time. We don't yet have a specific blood test or imaging test that you ask someone to undergo and then it confirms it. However, our clinical diagnosis, study after study, in good hands, we're right almost all the time, so above 95% of the time.
Now, most of us assume that memory loss is a part of it, but just as a natural, I mean, as the body ages, the brain ages too, so memory loss in and of itself is not a distinguishing characteristic.
Well, it actually is a distinguishing characteristic, but when people have some memory loss with normal aging, our speed of processing is a little slower. We might forget long lists of things, have a more difficult time learning things, but we're still able to function independently. That's the bright and shiny line between normal aging and having a disease like dementia or Alzheimer's disease, is because when memory impairment or ability to use language affects your ability to function independently, that's when that's the bright line that leads us to dementia.
So when a memory loss adversely affects your ability to do your work or a lifelong hobby or a relationship, but that's a concern.
Absolutely, but even things like someone says, well, I used to be able to manage my checkbook, but that's all a mystery to me now. That's a problem because you not only are not able to learn new things, you're not able to do the functions that you have been able to do. So there's a significant change in your function. What we need to do in Alzheimer's disease is fund research and invest in it, because we need not only a test that shows it before you're so affected, before you've lost function, but then we also need an intervention at that early stage, and that's what all the research is pointing to, that there are going to be ways, there may be 1 or 2 or 3 different approaches medication-wise, but we have to catch it so early before it does its basically serious damage to the brain.
So the research is focusing not only on slowing the progression of the disease, but delaying the onset.
It may represent a significant delay, such that it puts it out to the point past where we would be alive, for example, rather than a total cure. But there's a lot of hope in biomarkers, that's certain testing that we might have around genetics or other chemicals in our blood.
Talk to us about genetic testing. Is it available? Is it reliable? How much do you use that in your practice?
I don't use it at all in my practice because it's not yet important in the clinical diagnosis yet. So it
what does that mean?
There are certain genes that have been implicated or proven to contribute to Alzheimer's disease, but they only slightly raise your risk. They aren't, if you have it, this is 100%. So it doesn't have helpfulness in my setting. So if your parent had Alzheimer's disease, that raises your risk of Alzheimer's disease, much like one of the genes does. We need more than what we have now. There's a lot of hope that we're coming up with those things, but Alzheimer's research is terribly underfunded by the federal government.
Well, let's talk about that, because the National Institutes of Health, the federal funding for Alzheimer's research, is just about $600 million a year, compared with cancer, where there is between 10 and 100 times more funding nationally that's directed to those classes, many classes of disease.
And while this isn't a competition, I think cancer research is a wonderful thing that we've invested in as a society. it's paid dividends. No longer is cancer a uniform death sentence, but there's a lot of treatments, there's a lot of hope, and a lot of progress. And what we're asking is that because of the importance of this epidemic, how many people it's going to affect and currently affecting, how it will change our society economically and socially if we don't get an answer, we're saying, hey, let's invest in Alzheimer's disease, much like we have for AIDS, for cancer, heart disease, and let's see those dividends so future generations don't have to deal with this illness.
Right. Well, you made the point about research. Does that include clinical trials? Do you recommend that people participate in clinical trials? How do people find out about clinical trials if in fact that's a worthy opportunity?
It's a good question, and people should really weigh their own circumstances in terms of whether that's something that they want to do, because it's a very personal decision. But that is one of the barriers to Alzheimer's research, is getting enough people to enroll in clinical trials. There's a great service on the ALZ or Alzheimer's Association website, alz.org, called Trials Match, and it allows you to go in and put in your own personal information about your diagnosis, your stage, your issues, and then look at what trials might be available to you.
Are there trials going on in the state of Maine, or have there been that you're aware of that
We have had some small scale kind of drug trials for safety and for efficacy. Most of the trials in the Northeast, I would say most of them come out of Boston. Not all, but that's where the majority of them are. But the Trial Match site in the Alzheimer's Association website is helpful for people because it does show them the array of things they might be that they might qualify for.
Now, in addition to the physical issues associated with Alzheimer's disease, there are also psychosocial issues, are there not? Can you talk about that? Because am I correct in understanding that as the disease progresses, people may be reluctant or even resistant to care. They may become sad, they may become agitated.
Right. It's such an interesting disease that you can't really say for everyone, other than
Certainly.
we see cognitive decline. That's a uniform thing
And
that we do see.
cognitive decline means what?
Changes in your thinking, you know, your ability to recognize your family, to use words, your vocabulary shrinks. And so it starts as a purely thinking problem. And then as the disease progresses, it expands neurologically, so people have trouble walking, swallowing, their balance can be affected. So it generalizes. But as far as personality and social emotional changes, it's so interesting because some people have significant challenges with that: sadness, depression, emotional outbursts, resistance to care, and other people don't. They just are memory impaired and yet seem to have no insight into their problems. So we want to really individualize the care for people around their situation, their strengths, and minimizing their weaknesses.
Okay, so as a physician, in addition to taking care of the patients, I'm sure you're also very much aware of the caregiver issues that are associated with that.
I was going to say that social emotional issues are as important for caregivers as they also are for the people with the disease. Because if a caregiver becomes depressed or sick, they no longer can be a good caregiver. So as a physician, I really have to pay attention to several patients in the room, the person with the disease, but also who's on the care team, how are they coping, and to really encourage them to care for themselves, to get respite, to access resources that are available for caregivers, because this is a very difficult job and it often lasts a long time.
Very good. Let's come back and talk about that some more. We're going to talk with someone who's working as a caregiver for her husband. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
There's no place like Hollywood. From the newest slots to blockbuster jackpots and all the excitement you can handle. This is where you're in the spotlight. You're the star. A place where the action never stops and the night is always young. Hollywood, the name says it all.
Spectrum Generations. Live healthy, live well. Get answers. Get connected. Spectrum Generations, specializing in the art of aging.
The one thing that people that watch mainly motorsports might not be aware of is the passion that I have for all fields of motorsports. Welcome to this week's edition of Mainly Motorsports, brought to you by Snowpro. Anything I can do to help promote the sport, I'll do through the show.
We're over here at Seacoast Dyno. We're up here in Lyman, Maine. Now we've caught up with the 2008 champion in the box stock division.
No matter what kind of motorsports enthusiast you are, Mainly Motorsports will catch everybody's interest.
We're talking about Alzheimer's disease. I'm Dott Freeman. This is Mature Lifestyle. In the United States, there are 5.3 million Americans who are suffering with Alzheimer's disease. And there are 100 million Americans who report that they have been touched by Alzheimer's disease, either personally or by someone that they know. It is the 7th leading cause of death across all age groups in the United States, and for people over the age of 65, Alzheimer's disease is the 5th leading cause of death in the United States. In the state of Maine, nearly 500 people every year die of Alzheimer's disease. But this is a progressive disease, and today we're talking with Dr. Laurel Coleman, beg your pardon,
No
and
problem.
also Karen Stram, who is a caregiver. Her husband, Robert, a radiologist in Augusta, was diagnosed several years ago with Alzheimer's disease. And I'm going to ask you to tell us about your husband's case, because we really want to hear about you as a caregiver and what options are out there for other people who are caregivers. So welcome, Karen. And Laurel, forgive me for forgetting your last name. Coleman, Dr. Laurel Coleman,
I don't need
who's a
advertising.
geriatric specialist at Maine Medical Center. Karen, tell us about Robert.
Yes, well, probably 14 years ago, he was clearly having difficulty in his work, which is a highly cerebral kind of job. The thing that we didn't know at the time was that he probably had been having difficulty for even as much as 2 years before that. He was just having difficulty processing the information.
How old was Robert at that point?
He was 56.
So that's what we would refer to as early onset.
It is early onset, yes. And of course, I think being a physician, he probably was a little more aware of what the potential was of what he was experiencing. But certainly as far as the family was concerned and his partners and the people around him, they just thought that he was having difficulty, that he was under stress and whatever. So it did come to a point where he was no longer able to continue working, and he was treated for depression and anxiety for a couple of years. And then, of course, a couple of years. And then finally we got to the point where clearly that treatment wasn't working at all, and he was referred to a neurologist who then went through a series of tests, psychological tests primarily, and decided that indeed it probably was Alzheimer's. And so that was 12 years ago.
And what did the diagnosis do to your family, to you?
It is.
Did it change your life?
You know, it's actually interesting because we had been through such a difficult period up to that. In just the anxiety he was experiencing, knowing that he was not able to do the things that he would normally be able to do. He was under an enormous amount of stress as he was going through that period. Very difficult to get along with, very depressed. So yes, he was depressed, as a matter of fact. The problem was that the underlying disease, of course, was progressing as well. And so in one very small aspect, it was almost a relief to have something that we could actually say, okay, this is it. Blame, thank you. That's
Something to
exactly
blame.
the word.
And you see that in your practice, that
Sure.
people, once they get that's something.
Well, people vary, certainly, but for some people it is an actual explanation. I'm not going crazy. My family
Exactly.
says I'm going crazy,
Exactly.
but this is a real disease. And I'm not saying the other mental health issues aren't real diseases too, but again, something to blame, something to fight against, something to
fight
name.
against. And that was exactly the approach we took. He got into a clinical trial right away. We felt this was something we could give back, and being a physician, it was something he agreed that he would do. And also for me, I mean, when you go through these, they talk about the stages of Alzheimer's and the stages that the patient goes through, but the caregiver also goes through stages.
Tell us about those, Karen.
And you are angry, you are frustrated, you're fearful because you don't know. I mean, this is it's a fatal disease. You know there's only one outcome of this disease, but you feel frustrated because you want to be able to have something you can fight against, something you can react to, something you can do something about, something that you can make better. And of course you can't make the progression go away. So what I chose to do was, and we did, the clinical trial was one initial step, one small step that we could do to try to make things better. Not for him, but for the people having to face this disease in general. So as I went through these periods of loss, for one thing, not only of this person who was a huge part of my life, but a loss of who I was, because I now was a 24-hour caregiver. And it is, I used to talk about the umbilical cord. Everything that he did, everywhere he went, I was attached to because he was not able to function independently. I could give him slack, I could turn him loose and hope things are going to be okay, but he was never out of my mind.
But never out of your mind, certainly. But also just your own physical presence, and if he awakened in the night, that meant you got up in the night too.
Absolutely.
His sleep deprivation.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've read that 40% of caregivers themselves suffer from depression.
And I fought that. It's clear that.
And how did you fight it?
Well,
I know that you've been very active in the state association.
Because I am a proactive person, the first thing, actually the most helpful thing, well, first of all, a very helpful thing was having Laurel as a very good friend. But the other thing that I did, she introduced me to the Alzheimer's Association, and the first thing I did was take a day-long class that they were offering for caregivers. Now that logistically is difficult because I had to have somebody take care of him so that I could take a day and take the class.
And 70%,
but it was worth it.
70% of the people who are suffering with Alzheimer's are cared for in their home or home community. So I think many of us tend to assume, well, they're in a nursing home where they're getting care. For 70% of the people, that's not the case.
He was home for 9 years, and then he's actually at Maine Veterans now and has been there for 5. But this class gave me the ability to look at the disease in its entirety. It took me from being a victim and not being able to do anything to being the caregiver and managing this disease. And I think that's such an important transition for caregivers to make, because we have to learn how, it's a long progression. In his case now, we've been going 14 known years, you know, and potentially as much as 20 years we could be progressing through the disease. So we have to learn how to live with the disease. And in my case, or in the early stages, you help the person you love live with the disease. At some point, of course, it becomes more and more difficult for them to be able to manage any of their activities of daily living. And so you then, the caregiver, has to learn how to live themselves. Somebody once said, yes, I'm a wife, and he is somebody I love dearly and I want to care for all the time. But I'm also a mother. I have 2 wonderful children, all grown up, with grandchildren. I still have a 95-year-old mother who lives on the West Coast. So I'm still a mother, I'm still a daughter, I'm a grandmother, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, and all of those things are part of my life as well. And so it's balancing this care for this person who is getting to a point where he no longer recognizes me. He's being cared for, excuse me, very well in the setting where he is. They're wonderful caregivers there. And so it's a letting go. And so I say the caregiver goes through stages too. Sure. And so you do eventually get to a point where you realize that you have to live too. And I think that is one of the hardest transitions to make. Anybody who has put a loved one in a nursing home understands how hard it is to turn around and walk out the door and leave this person you love there. but you do have to recognize that there are all these other parts of your life as well, and to make that transition.
Laurel, is this what you hope to see in the teamwork of providing care for a patient? If there's this kind of family support, is it that critical?
Well, you know, I don't want to minimize for any family. This is extremely traumatic. I think Karen's lucky she has a great family support system. Not everybody has that. And that's no judgment on their family. That just means, you know, we have to deal with the reality of difficult, different families. I mean, if you were all alone and your children were a long way away, well, one was, but, and you didn't have any local support, I mean, different decisions would have to be made.
Absolutely.
So every case of Alzheimer's needs to be treated individually. Every family and caregiving situation does. There's some common resources, and Karen mentioned that. But this is such a unique disease that we really need to treat it that way. And you were saying, you know, you can't fight Alzheimer's disease right now as a terminal illness. There's no cure. It's uniformly fatal. But there's different ways to fight. Sometimes you fight for a cure for things like in cancer. In Alzheimer's disease right now, well, yeah, we should fight for a cure in research funding and more awareness, and all of us should be advocates for that. But we can fight for people's dignity. We can fight for that. So there's different things to fight for, and we help identify those things.
Thank you both so much. We're going to talk about some of those resources. Join us. We'll be back.
Spectrum Generations. Live healthy, live well. Get answers, get connected. Spectrum Generations, specializing in the art of aging.
There's no place like Hollywood. From the newest slots to blockbuster jackpots and all the excitement you can handle. This is where you're in the spotlight. You're the star. A place where the action never stops and the night is always young. Hollywood, the name says it all.
If you're dealing with Alzheimer's disease today, please know that you are not alone. There are community resources available, and we want to share those with you so that you can find out what you need to find out in the easiest possible way. There are support programs. If you will contact us at Spectrum Generations, let me give you the number, 1-800-282-0764. You can ask for Becca Reynolds, and she can share with you the Savvy Caregiver program. I strongly encourage you to look at that. You can also contact the Office of Elder Services. Please contact us. We're here to help you. I'm Dott Freeman. This is Mature Lifestyle.
Mature Lifestyle is made possible by Hollywood Slots of Bangor, where every player's a star, and by Knowlton Hewins Roberts Funeral Homes and Cremation Service. Our homes are warm and welcoming, and we take care of you and your family like we would our own. Call us anytime. We are here for you.